Parents of Reddit whose children have dated awful people. Who was the worst? My brother dated a girl who pretended to have cancer when she thought, correctly, he was going to break up with her. Her parents went along with it. Here's the crazy part. My dad is an oncologist. This girl could have chosen any other disease, or maybe even sanity, but she went with cancer. My dad was asking for the name of her doctor, offering to help out, but she was strangely vague and dismissive. We all felt suspicious, and we felt bad for feeling suspicious. It took 6 weeks, but my brother managed to get her mom alone, questioned her a little, and found out her daughter wasn't sick. Well, not physically. Not a parent, but this one is about my brother. A girl he was dating for around 2 months got pregnant. Being the stand-up guy he immediately had her move in with him in his tiny college apartment. Went with her to doctor's appointments. Maximed out his credit cards paying for everything. Then the girl's sister came to visit, and only as she was leaving did she tell my bro he seemed like a nice guy, so he should know her sister was pregnant before they started dating. If it hadn't been for her, my brother would be raising that kid as his own. It was a sad situation all around. My sister and I were very close to our uncle, mom's brother, growing up. He was the guy who pretended to be Santa and the Easter Bunny for us. He got engaged to this woman named Christine. I remember she was incredibly beautiful, but apparently incredibly jealous and crazy. My sister and I didn't know this. Obviously our interactions with her were minimal but positive, and she looked like a Disney princess. For various reasons, including my family's dislike of her toxic jealousy, my uncle broke off their engagement. A few days later I happened to notice something moving fast outside. I peek through the blinds, and it's Christine out on our front lawn. I tell my mom and watch the blood drain from her face. She tells me to go to my room and whispers to my dad to call the cops. Long story short, Christine had threatened to kill all of us if my uncle broke up with her. When she showed up at our house, she was threatening to burn it down. First guy my daughter dated, barely in high school, already showing attitude problems. Anyone older than him was seen as an annoyance in whatever he wanted to do in life. Even at 15. Came from a broken home. Turned out he was the third of 10 plus kids by one man with as many different women. Already started getting suspension in high school because of same disrespect towards teachers. Had unfortunately convinced daughter to skip school a few times with him. Her grades started showing major drop. Had to start intervention. Took 6 months and discovery of him trying to date 2 other girls. That finally stopped the relationship. He had gotten one of those girls pregnant by mid 9th grade year. Seeing the relationship end, felt crisis averted. A year later as we are at home, daughter comes running into living room saying he is outside her bedroom. Before I can check the backside of house, cop has come up to house. He apparently pushed his mom down a flight of stairs in an argument. Took off and could only think to come here as I'm talking to cop, bringing her to backside of house. We hear the gate slam on the other side as he takes off down the road. Cop says he is not as much of a threat to spend chasing. Puts out an APB for others. If they see him, I request a restraining order to clear any controversy I may have. 2 years pass. Apparently he got 3 different girls pregnant in those 2 years. Daughter comes home one day to tell me he has a warrant out. Had pushed his 3rd pregnant girlfriend down a flight of stairs in an argument. She had ended up miscarrying. Local police office actually contacted me later that night about it, since I had requested a restraining order on him 2 years prior and they did not know his whereabouts. They find him about 40 miles north, charge him with manslaughter, and he has been serving a sentence since he was 17. About 2 to 3 years ago. I fear for the 2 other children he had with his other girlfriends each time I think about them. There have been 2, each worse than the last. First one was manipulative as hell, treated him like and cheated on him. 3 breakups despite us telling him not to be a doormat and this wasn't how our relationship should be, but luckily the cheating was the deal breaker. Next one went batch crazy. After he broke up with her, won thousands of messages and calls, and he had to get a no contact order against her and have her charged. She then threatened to report him for assault in retaliation. She did it, and 2 detectives showed up at my door. Luckily she was dumb enough to admit in text her plan, and acknowledged that he never assaulted her when he told her to go ahead because he hadn't done anything. She also put in writing that she was hurting herself to give bruises and scratches. We were all in lockdown, so neither of them had left the house for 7 weeks, making it impossible for him to have done it. She wasn't very smart. Worst 2 weeks of our lives waiting for the results of that investigation. He is taking a break from dating now. He sure can pick them. My older sister dated every sleaze in the book, but the one she was craziest about convinced her they should have a joint bank account, then proceeded to steal almost a year's worth of salary from her account. Apparently he was doing this to around 3 other girls at the same time. My little sister dated a felon. He was older. She was in high school. He broke probation with my sister in the car. They got pulled over for something. He bolted and left her behind the wheel. A K9 unit took him down. My parents received a call from the cops to pick her up. My sister was pretty embarrassed about the whole thing and dumped him. The worst I've dated was a musician. That bugged my mom the most. My daughter, her boyfriend was 18 years old and already had 2 kids that he didn't take care of at all. I told her over and over to protect herself and not get pregnant by this 2-time loser. She did it anyway and now has a baby by this idiot. They are no longer together and he's not doing a damned thing for the baby. She's now a single mom struggling. Don't get me wrong. She's as big of an idiot, or bigger, as he is. She even stopped taking her birth control pills knowing she was having unprotected intimate time with this moron. So, yes, they are both major dumbasses, but he's by far the worst my daughter has dated. My brother dated a girl. They broke up, and about 5-ish years later she went to jail for murdering her newborn baby. A little bit more information. She and her boyfriend, the baby dad, were, from what I read on some of the news pages, they were addicted to meth and the 11-day-old baby had meth in its system. She was convicted of second-degree manslaughter. No clue on how long she is in prison for. This was back in 2017. The news articles didn't mention anything of how long she was sentenced for. My daughter dates someone for about 3 years. We'll call him Jay. He seemed okay, but his father was a complete jerk who had no problems demonstrating what a jerk he was. It was so problematic to Jay that we seriously discussed letting him move into our basement until he finished school. The only reason we didn't is because we felt that would put an unnatural pressure on our daughter. Eventually, our daughter broke up with him, and Jay did some angry burning of bridges before it was finally over. 13 years after that, we discovered Jay has joined one of those churches, now has 6 kids, won't let his 10-year-old wear anything but long sack dresses, has enrolled all the kids in some crazy religious school, and has become a complete Bible-banging jerk. It's difficult to believe he's turned into a worse version of his father, but it sure appears he has. So glad we all dodged that nightmare. Not a parent, but a brother. My sister's last boyfriend hit me with his car and threatened to beat my current fiancé, stole money from me, threatened her and my mom, and tried to get his friends to destroy her car. Tried to fight my 60-year-old father in front of cops. All the fiancé stuff happened before he was 18. After he turned 18 we had a nice conversation about his now legal adult status. This dude my daughter dated was the worst. She met him and then everything locked down. When she was able to see him again it was his birthday and he spent more time trying to hug and kiss me than her. That wasn't okay with me. It also tried to encourage him to spend time with her. She was understandably very upset and standoffish. Her dad once tried to ask his intentions as well, and he was completely ignored. Damn 2-year-olds. My daughter had the misfortune of dating a dyed-in-the-wool militant man-hating lesbian. She was the vilest creature I've ever had the misfortune of meeting. She not only tried to turn my daughter against me, her dad, but also against her brothers. Us being a close family were absolutely devastated by this behavior. Thankfully my daughter saw the light and dumped the hateful bee. The woman she's now married to is like an extra daughter to me, and they are extremely happy together. Involved a friend, not my kid. A good friend in high school developed a coke and heroin problem while at undergrad in a different state. I caught up with him right after graduating and coming home myself. That's when I realized he hadn't graduated. Shocking, because he was such a great student in high school and begged me not to tell his family. I had him move in with me while we worked through his withdrawal, which was a nightmare that we both had to push through. To his immense credit, he went clean. I continued to support him in any way I could. We studied for and took the GMAT together. We ended up getting into top tier MBA programs, but in different states. So we said bye to one another again. He got a great job with Apple after. I was always very happy for the fact he turned his life around, and his parents never discovered what happened in undergrad. Years later I went to a house party where him and his wife, whom I had never met, were also invited. I was super excited to see him while we were back in town for the holidays. At one point he disappeared for a solid 40 minutes. I got to chatting with his wife. She came from an incredibly affluent family, as in she didn't have a real job, didn't need one kind of money family. I asked her where he had gone off to. She said he was going to score an 8-ball of coke for her and other guests. I began to explain to her about what happened in undergrad, and after, she nodded her spoiled rich kid head the whole way and then said, yeah, he told me about how hard it was getting clean, but once we got married I insisted we both get back into it. Enraged, I wanted to physically hurt her till she apologized, but I'm not crazy, so I didn't. When he walked in the front door he knew that I knew, just based on the stare I gave and the uncomfortable look at the ground he returned. I texted him to say I was outside and he could come with me again. Just like old times, no judgment. He texted back to say thank you, but he was staying. I never saw him or communicated with him again. Hope that woman burns for pushing him back into it so selfishly. I dated a guy when I was 19 who was 10 years older than me. He went through phases where he'd act like he adored me, and then he'd treat me like absolute sh for months on end. Said it was because he had multiple personalities. He'd break my sh, punch holes in walls, and scream at me for hours on end. But my 19-year-old brain thought I loved him. He completely isolated me from my parents, and I didn't speak to them for about a year. Mind you, I had always been really close to my parents growing up and had just moved out. This guy even convinced me to be homeless with him for months, then made me use my money to get us a place and live there rent free. Refused to get a job. His goal in life was to have a baby with me, and he didn't tell me until later that he had 2 kids with 2 other women that were taken away. I'm sure if my parents had read it they'd respond to this post about him. We all went to therapy and everything. Luckily I left him after 2 miserable years and everything is okay between me and my parents now. Have never felt better, despite a slight bit of trauma and a reluctance to date again. I'm only 22, so hopefully I'll be okay soon.